Hello friends, as I said in my earlier video, due to COVID-19 crisis, we the teachers of Kuch Bihar Panchanan Burma University have long since gone into online teaching, and none of our teachers' expertise, infrastructure or network status does allow for a very perfect type of lecture online, because just like the students, we are new to it. However, it is our inertia of motion that as the world changes, we must change and adapt to it. That is keeping the clock ticking. And I am personally suffering from quite serious respiratory tract infection, and accordingly the sound quality of these lectures may be a little more upset than usual. Today we will talk on a very pertinent topic of modernist poetry and its translation from one language to another language. Before I begin today's lecture, I must make it clear that I do not have a technical or official specialization in translation studies. It's just that as a student of Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, I had full-fledged papers in my master's in English syllabus on translation studies, as well as in my MPhil coursework. I had full-fledged courses. As a student myself, I have negotiated that course. And in my youth, when I was around 22 or 23, I was quite a regular translator for Bengali publishing houses like Dev Sahitya Kutir and their magazine Nobokollol. So it's just like a personal engagement that I am addressing the arena of translation studies. Today we will talk on the interlink between the modernist aesthetics and its applicability when we are actually translating one modernist poem from one language to English or some other target code. Today we will see the basics of the so-called Imagist translation, definitely pioneered by EZRA POUND, and its applicability and suitability when we encounter the translation of specific Bengali modernist poems. Now, personally, I believe that a fish who knows how to swim is a good swimmer, but not a good swimming coach. A fish doesn't teach you how to swim. For technical coaching, technical applicability is necessary, and that's why we are trying to figure out in these lectures, or let's say in this series of lectures in YouTube that I am bringing out and going to bring out, how the theories of translation studies can actually make you a good translator if you are taught well and if you learn well these theories, because theories are not top down, they are actually bottom up. They have actually come into significant generalization as theory from practice or praxis itself. One of the hallmarks of modernist translation studies was the theory of proper translation, and Richard, known in East Europe as Reichard, was one of the proponents of the so-called proper translation. Now, as against that type of proper translation, Ezra Pound was a theorist and practitioner of, especially in the domain of poetry, translating in spirit, because poetry is something that would be lost if proper translation is executed upon it. It's not a frog in the laboratory that you increase or decrease the voltage and you record the responses. It's rather a kind of something spiritual and something imaginative, something intuitive, something very creative. So when we are translating a poem, instead of proper translation, what we need, according to Ezra Pound, one of the founding fathers of modernist poetry itself, is a translation which focuses upon exact rendering of each individual image created by the words in the original poem. Now, when we say image, definitely we are using the term in a highly specialized context. The students can go to my lectures in this channel only on imagism to understand what is the difference between an image as a technical term and just any picture or visualization. Now, when Ezra Pound says that the words in the original poem constitute an image or a set of images, and you are translating it, I mean, you are translating that poem, then the primary job is to translate the images. Now, the image is not a formal, empty entity in which some meaning is added. The image is the constituent of meaning in the poem because the image is made with words. So let's think about the words as units. With these units called words, image-টা তৈরি হয়েছে, the image is constructed, and the image conducts immediately a time, space, and mood that the creator actually experienced with his sensory perceptions to the readers who reads these words. So the image to be translated means that we are not translating the words, but we are translating the time, space, mood, specificity or particularity described by those words. And therefore, Ezra Pound's theory of translation assumed a concept of energy that each of these words do carry within it. This is what we call in other domains of discussions the translation in spirit. If you can keep the energy intact, formal changes, however insane, will not damage the translation. So slavery to the original may damage the spirit, but faithfulness to the energy that the words constitute or the image conducts will never hamper or hazard the act of translation. Rather, it will be a good translation. So Ezra Pound believed that words are like sculpted images. The translator must translate the image, not the sentence, not the culture, not the coffee house to the muddy bamboo-made sacks if it is being translated from French to Rajabangshi. Not the context, but the primary energy, because every word that is making the image is making the image full with certain type of radiation, and the image would radiate it if it is put on painting in form of intersemiotic translation, the same energy will be radiated. If it is intralingual translation, so from Totshamo Bangla to Rajbangshi Katho, let's say, even then the same radiance will be radiating from the images constituted by the words. So it is important to understand the energy and to translate the energy which is contained in the words that constitute the individual images in a poem. So that would mean that Ezra Pound was believing that words do not refer to objects, but words refer to the objects in action, a thing in action, so to say. The objects in art and dead, isolated from the action in which the words of the poem have put the images or the objects, would not be translated, but the thing in action, in process, in motion, in dynamic energy must be translated. Now, Pound, when we talk about this gentleman in Anglo-American British literature, we have to be very careful, because just like any skillful evolutionary creature, he could adopt and he could adapt to and he could be adept in the newer forms every day, and therefore he was revisioning himself continuously. In the imagist state, what he meant by an image, and in the vorticist phase, what he meant by an image, are radically different. In the imagist phase, when Ezra Pound was the alpha and omega of the imagist movement, and Hilda Doolittle was his, let's say, main spokesperson, Ezra Pound would mean by image a precise visual mathematics of time, space, and mood. But in the vorticist phase, because the imagist movement was already quite appropriated by Amy Lowell and the Anglo-American branch of imagism, instead of Pound continuing with the movement, Pound drifted towards the vorticist movement. In the vorticist phase, Ezra Pound believed that the image an image is located in the vortex of an artwork or a discourse. Now, what is a vortex? If you look into the picture, which is on the right, you will see that there are lots of centripetal or kendrabhimukhi circles or urges or impulsions, which are looking very dynamic and energetic, centralized into a soup or a kind of suction at the center, which is kind of drawing all the forces around it towards itself. Now that is a vortex, which became the changed synonym for an image when Ezra Pound changed his jersey from imagism to vorticism. Image is equal to the density of the vortex. And what is a vortex? It is the densest central point of centripetal energies, consciousnesses, moods, impulses, urges, which are conducted through the words of the artwork. So the point of maximum energy, which is so maximized in its energy that all the other circles of energy or waves of energy are drawn to it, sucked inside it. And the image is the thing in this action. I am giving you a very quick example. The words are powered with or charged with centuries of consensus, centuries of association, centuries of agreement, and centuries of chinta bhavna or mentation or cognition. So when a poet is using a word, until and unless it is a portmanteau word, it cannot be absolutely new. He's deriving from a field of energies which are already associated with the word. So if we are saying গলির মোড়ে একটা গাছ দাঁড়িয়ে, গাছ নয় গাছের প্রেতচ্ছায়া, then the word pretochaya or the word ghost or specter or however you translate it, it is not standing for the object or the referent called ghost, but centuries of agreements, superstitions, fantasies, anticipations, fear, and human adventurism on, by, about, into, against the ghost. So an image draws with it because it is made with word, and every word contains an energy, and every word contains an energy of centuries of agreement in that language, associations in that language, references in that language, differences in that language. Therefore, when we are translating the words, we are translating basically the centuries of associations in the word in a target language, and if that target language has a different tradition of centuries of associations with a different signifier, we have to look for that signifier while translating. We will look into Shanka Ghosh's Bhalo, a poem. But before that, we must have a word about the methodology that we are adapting and why we're using it. Pound started writing a book on Arnott Daniel, and the book never came out. This was the book that Pound wanted to write on translation. Instead, there were a series of 12 articles on translation that Pound published in his friendly journals. And these 12 articles came out as a series, just like you have a Netflix series today with episodes, with 12 episodes, let us say, with the title, I Gather the Limbs of Osiris. Now, Osiris, when his severed limbs were torn apart and then they were put together, and Osiris was regenerated with the power of limbs, he not only became the god of death, he also became, just like a Blackian contrary where the lamb and the tiger are the two faces of the same force, he also became not only the king of death or god of death, but the only instance in the world of re-enlivening or reanimation, because his dead limbs, severed limbs, were reanimated. তাই Osiris, Pound বলতে চাইছেন, Pound is trying to argue, is a kind of putting fresh blood into dead ghosts. And this is the act of the translators. The translator, when he will go into any form of proper or formal translation, will lose the lifeblood of the original. And the only political or sociological or cultural or linguistic faithfulness to the original is also very, very formal and constitutional act. Instead, faithfulness must be to the energy, and so that the listener or the reader or the receiver or the respondent in the new code or so-called language by the layman, new language, the target language, so to say, will find out the translated work having the same kind of animation as it was before the act of translation. So Pound translated in the first article of this series the Anglo-Saxon poem, The Seafarer, which is quite commonly known to the honors first-year students of 1+1+1 BA English major system. Pound in this poem says very clearly that he is not translating the objects, nor the Anglo-Saxon culture is faithfully adhered to, nor the modern Anglo-American British 20th century is being respected as the only owner of the act of translation. He is not suffering from any type of colonial, post-colonial, original target ownership, because nobody owns the translation. It is the force within the image that owns the translation. So only thing that must be translated is the energy. Now we want to see the relevance of it, not the mimetics of translation, but the energetics of translation. Because you see, when we say bhalo, it is already very ambiguous in the original code, because bhalo can mean good or positive, and bhalo can also mean an exclamation which is bhalo, like an ironical caricature on the bad done to you, which you are like a stoic dismissing as with the exclamation okay, bhalo. Or the existential question, is entrapment to a meaningless world doing us good, when the world is suggesting that it wants to be good and do good to the individual? Actually, isn't the individual becoming something like a nauseating tree under the static violence of the surrounding, that everything and everybody wants to do value to it, including the political class enemies, and actually they, in the name of welfare, do bad to you by making you already dead? So this was the energy in the title and in the key phrase of the poem, bhalo. So we have to translate that energy. The energy is therefore like a নকল plus ভাঙানো, or let's say revolution and radicalism in statement plus caricature and questioning and interrogation of the welfare of the individual within any community, which the poet feels is based upon some kind of violence against the individual by the community. প্রথম সেন্টেন্স কবিতার সবাই আমার ভালো করতে চায়। Now, if you translate it as everyone wants to do good to me, which would be a proper translation, the main problem is the word everyone will carry with it too much of individual dignity and respect. But here where the poet says সবাই, he actually means the anonymous violence of the collective, including the class enemies or political antagonists. So সবাই আমার ভালো করতে চায়, the সবাই should not be translated as everyone, but it should be minimized in its dignity and respect, because that is the energy of the word shobai. So it has to be translated as everybody instead of everyone. If you say everyone, it would sound too dignified for that energy. And you cannot write everyone wants to do good to me. সবাই আমার ভালো করতে চায়. That attonipodi kriya has to be converted into a noun, completely removing the auxiliary verb. Everybody wants to do me good will mean literally something opposite to what the poet is wanting to say. So everybody wants my good, and you see these 9 syllables are there. And for pound and for Vortice's translation, the rhythm was very important, because if you damage the rhythm, if you damage the music, half of the translation of a poem or a lyric is dead. In line 1 of the Bengali version, shobai amar bhalo korte chaye has 9 syllables, and here this translation, even at the formal level, has 9 syllables. So you can say that it is both a formal translation, keeping the prosody intact, plus it is a Vortice's translation, because it is actually trying to retain the irony and the caricature of the sentence, the energies of the sentence as much. If you come now, let us look into line 3 of the poem. ঘর ছেড়ে এগিয়ে যাই. Now, ঘর in Bengali would mean home. But ঘর ছেড়ে is not to leave the home, but to leave the room, to leave the space, as if friends will get the space to help you, and foe will get the space to attack you. So to leave the room and to leave the ground in line 6, মাঠ ছেড়ে গিয়ে যাই. এখানে কিন্তু মাঠের ট্রান্সলেশন ফিল্ড বা ঘর ছেড়ে গিয়ে যাই, ঘরের ট্রান্সলেশন হোম, হাউস, রেসিডেন্স, অ্যাবোর্ড ইত্যাদি করলে চলবে না, বিকজ ঘর ছেড়ে অ্যান্ড মাঠ ছেড়ে আর both Bengali idiomatic uses which have an energy, and the energy or the image is someone is partially at least giving up space, either to test the enemy or by some kind of stoic resignation. But he or she, the individual, the lyric speaker in case of a poem, is definitely making room for the antagonistic forces to impinge upon its being, and he or she will either tolerate it or resist it or conquer it. That's a different question, but making room for the antagonism. ঘর ছেড়ে এগিয়ে যাই, মাঠ ছেড়ে এগিয়ে যাই in Bengali, line 3 and 6. There is no other option to my understanding other than translating it as when I leave the room for them, which is English and which is idiomatic in the same energy, and when I leave my grounds, because to leave the ground, to leave the room for the enemy within third bracket is the same English energy in its idiomatic use as we have in case of ঘর ছেড়ে গিয়ে যাওয়া বা মাঠ ছেড়ে বেরিয়ে যাওয়া. And now we come to the refrain, which is very important, because this is the center of gravity of the poem, that the truncated fingers or the amputated fingers of the hands of the individual who has become dehumanized by the act of truncation by the enemy who actually came in the guise of welfare, this central image has to be translated in a vorticist methodology. You cannot think about my severed fingers, my cut fingers, my amputated fingers, my disjointed fingers কারণ এখানে কাটা বা যাকে ভালো বাংলায় বলা হয় কর্তন করা, কর্তিত আঙুলের ওপরে কিন্তু এনার্জিটা নেই। বিকজ আঙুল কেটে দেওয়া হয়েছে মানে দ্যাট ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল হ্যাজ বিকাম আ ভিকটিম টু কালেকটিভ অ্যাগ্রেশন, which actually came in the disguise of tradition, welfare, doing good, etc., but actually has violated the individual. And the act of that violence, just like in Ted Hughes' poems, has made the individual's humanity, activity, strength apparently diminished. It has disintegrated the individual, just like in case of Marxism. You believe that the factory system and the class oppression actually dehumanizes the human beings into hands, thus metonymically reducing the humanity and the totality and the integrity of the lyric speaker or the human being into fingers, hands, roll numbers, etc. So the word that you have to use, in other words, the image that you have to use, in other words, the vortex that you have to use when translating to my prescription is my dismembered fingers, because the word implies both cutting of some organ from its original integrity and when the individual is no longer a member of the society that violates it in the name of doing good to it. My dismembered fingers ডাকতে থাকের পরিবর্তে সিগন্যাল, কারণ যদি এখানে কল মি, বেকন মি, সামন মি ইত্যাদি বলো, তাহলে দেয়ার উইল বি আ কাইন্ড অফ amity or amiability or amicability implied, and that is not the energy of the vortex. Rather, just like a dangerous alarm, ডাকতে থাকেটা অনেকটা ডেঞ্জারাস অ্যালার্মের মতো কাজ করছে, সেই জন্য ইশারায় ডাকতে থাকা অর্থটাও বহিত হলো, আবার অ্যালার্ম শব্দটাও দতিত হলো। এরকম একটা ভর্টেক্স আমাদের চাই। সো মাই ডিসমেম্বার্ড ফিঙ্গার্স সিগন্যাল কাম কাম, instead of my cut fingers or amputated fingers hanging from the tree are calling me come come, which will become a very very bad translation. So if you like this discussion and if you like my channel, please give it a like and of course subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.